Yo, what's happening people? I'm Era from EraTheProducer.com and welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how I make dark orchestral melodies similar to Southside and Pyrex.
Era on the track.
So before I get into this sample, I'm quickly just going to go over sound selection. When making these types of melodies, you generally want to be using the most realistic sounding VSTs and libraries that you have. If you're on a higher budget, then Contact libraries are going to be a good option, but there are also some really good sounds in some free orchestral libraries like Labs and the BBC Symphony Orchestra. So this loop started with the Augmented Grand Piano by Arturia, and I'm using the Kyrios preset. This loop was made at 150 BPM and I'm using the F sharp minor scale. The pattern for this is actually quite simple. I'm just starting on my root note, which is F sharp, and then for the second half, I'm coming down to the 6th, which is D. I've also added these passing notes in between so the piano doesn't sound so flat. To this piano, I've then added an EQ, which is cutting out some of the low frequencies, and I've also added a couple of cuts to the lower mids. Next, I added Tape Mellowify with the subtle width preset, and I've just turned the wear and the noise all the way down. And to add some space to the piano, I'm using Rev Intensity with the Infinity preset. Next, I went to Contact and chose the Triangle Harp from the Ancient World Bank. This pattern's quite a weird one because it's actually two separate melodies that I thought of combined together. They're both just starting on the root note and then doing some runs up and down, and to be honest, it actually works. Onto this, I've then just got an EQ which is cutting out some of the low end, and then I added an instance of Guitar Rig using the Fired Space preset. Next, I wanted to add some strings, so I went to the BBC Symphony Orchestra and chose the Strings 1 preset. This VST plugin's absolutely free, and I still can't get my head around how good some of these sounds are. This pattern's just going from the root note to the 5th, and then in between I'm using these semitone intervals to try and keep that dark feel. These strings have an EQ which is cutting out everything below 150 Hz, and then I've also got a high cut at around 20 kHz. Next, I went ahead and added Pan Man to add some movement, an effect rack with the Finite Space preset, and I've got my mix at around 55%. This is then going into Rev Intensity, and again I'm using the Infinity preset, and I've got my mix at around 30%. And lastly, I added a Fruity Stereo Enhancer to make this sound more wide. Next, I wanted to add some brass stabs, so I went to the Orchestral library and chose one of the Evil brass presets. There's not really too much to see with this pattern, it's just following the root notes of the piano. On this, we've just got an EQ that's cutting out some of the muddier low frequencies. Next, I added halftime with the loop setting on 1/4 of a bar, and I'm just using the mix knob in a channel rack to reintroduce some of that dry signal. Again, I've gone with Rev Intensity. This time I'm using the Cool Room preset, and I've got my mix knob at around 60%. Lastly, I added a fruity delay using the ping pong mode. I've got my time setting on 8 and my mix is at around 40%. Next, I went ahead and added a choir sound, and this is just going to come in on the second half of the loop. For this, I went with the Cinematic Alpha Vocals Edition. Another really simple pattern here with the root notes just being played over 2 octaves. Onto this, I then added a fruity delay with the exact same settings as the brass. Next I added halftime. Again, I've got my loop setting on 1/4 of a bar, but this time I've used the band settings and the mix knob to blend this effect with the dry signal. And after this I added an EQ to just clean up and remove some of the harsh frequencies. The last thing I added to this loop was a pad, and this is just going to sit nicely in the background. This layer just copies the same pattern from the choir, but it's only playing on 1 octave. I've just cut some of the low end out with an EQ, used Shaper Box to automate the volume and add some movement. Next I added some reverb with rev intensity, and I'm using the distant sci-fi preset. And then again I'm using the fruity stereo enhancer to just make this sound more wide. And yeah, that's all I've added to this sample, so let's take a listen to how it came out.
This shit crazy.
And that is going to bring us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, or if you learned anything new from it, then make sure to hit the thumbs up button before you leave. And if you're new to the channel, then do me a favor and hit that subscribe button too. All of the FLPs from my videos, as well as other bonus content, can be found on my Patreon, so I'll leave some links to that in the video description. If you'd like to know how I make dark and evil Halloween style melodies, then I'll leave a link to that video up here. Then I'll just leave a random video from the channel down here. Big shout out to anybody that made it all the way to the end of the video. I've been Era. Thanks again for watching, and I'll hopefully catch you all in the next one.